Okay, so why did all of this news break today? Good question, valid question, and I'll explain it to you. So this morning it was reported that Charlie Cox was spotted on the set of Spider-Man 3, which is why no details in the initial reports were provided as to what Charlie Cox does in the film, just that he was on set and is therefore confirmed for Spider-Man 3. So many of you quickly asked me to confirm. Thank you very much. So I checked with my sources, and one of them, seeing that the cat was out of the bag with Cox being spotted on set, it was like a thread to pull on, and I got such a giant amount of tea poured on me, I couldn't believe it. And now I'm going to pass it on to you. So fantastic. I've tweeted a lot of this stuff. I have some additional details, and I'm going to lay it out for you just beautifully. What a tea service. All right, so yes, Charlie Cox's Daredevil is in Spider-Man 3. And as I'm able to add to the story, he will represent Peter Parker as a lawyer. As I tweeted, Feige considered Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, another New York City Marvel lawyer who, of course, is going to be joining the MCU very soon. But Kevin Feige felt that since Daredevil and Spider-Man have such a strong history in the comics, he just couldn't pass up that opportunity to give that to the fans. Remember how, like in Endgame, when Captain America picked up Mjolnir and the whole crowd was just going nuts? That's going to be like the whole multiverse saga, like constantly throughout well, I think WandaVision's going to ramp things up, and then at the end it'll explode. But Spider-Man 3 and Doctor Strange 2 are just going to be just like that, like constantly throughout the film. It's going to be very exciting. You'll probably have to see it multiple times because you'll miss dialogue with everybody screaming. There'll have to be screenings where it's like, okay, nobody talk, because we want to hear everything. All right, so anyway, Feige, I will say, briefly considered recasting Daredevil because, he's worried about having to bring everybody in from Marvel Netflix, or people arguing that he should. I'll talk about who he likes in the Marvel Netflix shows. But he decided, obviously, the fans would riot. It would be bad. And Kevin Feige is not a stupid man, as he's proven quite well. Now, Daredevil likely has a small role in Spider-Man 3. Remember, at the end of Far From Home, J. Jonah Jameson reveals that Peter Parker is Spider-Man on the internet. So I'm sure Peter needs some legal advice on what his options are, and doesn't have a lot of money for a lawyer, as he's the people's hero. And enter Matt Murdock, the people's lawyer. It's very good. It's very organic. And by the way, speaking of Peter's secret identity, here's my wager. I'm betting that one of the multiverse Spider-Men can help Peter Parker clear up that secret identity leak by wearing one of Tom Holland's suits so that Tom Holland's Peter Parker, and Spider-Man can appear together at the same time and debunk that rumor. J. Jonah Jameson's going to be so mad. Problem solved in a very clever way, I might add. Now, will Daredevil suit up in the movie? That I don't know. My source didn't know. I think it's more, because I certainly asked. Now, I think it's more likely that Daredevil could show up maybe in a big battle sequence, like it's part of a larger group like an Endgame. But I also think maybe you could just see him in a suit. Maybe he gives Peter legal advice while they're both on patrol. It's not, Peter Parker's identity is out there. So Matt Murdock would know who he was, and he would, Peter wouldn't have to hide. Well, but would Matt Murdock want to reveal that? Does everybody? I forget with the Daredevil shows on Netflix if everybody knows Matt Murdock. It's with Matt Murdock. It's like a freaking revolving door if people know he's Daredevil or not, which could be a funny joke. He's like, it's not so bad people knowing your secret identity, although it has caused a lot of problems for Matt Murdock. But anyway, they could either meet in Matt Murdock's office or on a New York City rooftop. Both would be fantastic. Now, anyway, and also that would, if they met on a rooftop, it would keep Feige from having to hire, any of Daredevil's supporting cast to come back because, they wouldn't be in the office. All right, so anyway, again, all of these multiverse movies are going to be crowded, right? So there's only so much room for these guest stars. Don't expect like full developed arcs and scenes. However, I am hearing that this will not be the end, well, not necessarily the end, of Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock in the MCU, as there are talks for him to come over to the She-Hulk Disney Plus show starring Tatiana Maslany. Although she swears she's not in it, although everybody's like, you are in it. It's ridiculous. Although Mads Mikkelsen swore that he wasn't, Grindelwald, and then of course he was. But anyway, I'm not sure how big Charlie Cox's role would be on She-Hulk either, because as I've also told you, I'm hearing the She-Hulk show will focus on a whole bunch of Hulks. It'll be like a whole Hulk bonanza over there. But still, it's nice to know that Feige is actively working to weave Charlie Cox's Daredevil into the MCU. And even if he just shows up in a scene, or he's even that, they're on opposite sides of a case, and he shows up for 1 or 2 action sequences, fans will be very happy. Now remember, the New York City corner of the Marvel Universe in the comics is very specific, and Spider-Man has always interacted with his fellow New York heroes. He's often been the focal point. Don't forget the Kingpin started out as a Spider-Man villain. So, on that note, does this mean that all Marvel Netflix shows are coming back? It does not. But I'm hearing that these are the characters that Feige is happy with. He likes Charlie Cox's Daredevil, which I've told you before. Now I'm also hearing he likes Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. He likes Christian Ritter's Jessica Jones, but remember that Olivia Wilde is making a Jessica Drew movie over at Sony, and the characters could just be too similar. In fact, remember, infamously, Brian Michael Bendis wanted to do a show with his original comic, the Jessica Jones comic, with Jessica Drew, but Marvel wouldn't let him because it was, a hard R. So that's why he did Jessica Jones instead, and that's why the characters are so similar. But anyway, I hope maybe they could figure it out. And then also, he also likes John Bernthal's Punisher. That's who he likes. Everybody else would likely be recast. And while I enjoyed a lot of the cast in the Marvel Netflix shows, I think with the other roles, I think we all understand there could be some improvements there. Although I would like to see some exceptions for that Daredevil supporting cast. Fingers crossed. I love them. I mean, I did love Bullseye. I did love that version of Bullseye, but I'm not as married to it as I am to Daredevil's core cast. Now, speaking of Spider-Man's classic comic book friendships, he's also got a very strong one with Deadpool. And if Feige is going to try to be comics accurate by bringing in Daredevil, how can he leave out Deadpool? So I checked with my sources on that. And sure enough, they confirmed that Deadpool will show up either in Spider-Man 3, Doctor Strange 2, or maybe even both. But again, Deadpool scenes could be very short. But what's important, besides the Spider-Man connection, and remember, in the comics, Deadpool has a crush on Spider-Man, and I can't wait to see what Ryan Reynolds does with that. But also, Deadpool needs to be brought into the MCU, just like Feige is using the multiverse as a shortcut to the Sinister Six, which I predicted back in October when Jamie Foxx's Electro came on board, and which has now been confirmed with the addition of Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. I think it's pretty clear, Feige, and I'm also hearing this from my sources, that Feige is using it as a shortcut to fold in all the Fox properties that he just got his hands on. Now, I'm not confirming at this point if or where the X-Men or Fantastic Four will show up in Feige's multiverse saga, but they will certainly, at the very least, spin out of those events. I know some of you feel Spider-Man 3 is too crowded, but I have to say, to me as a comic book fan, it feels very much like a Spider-Man movie based on the Marvel comics. I mean, it might seem weird to you if you don't read the comics, but these are characters that Spider-Man interacts with all the time. It makes total sense. Then for Doctor Strange 2, that will open things up even more to the entire Marvel universe in the comics now that Feige has complete control of all those properties. Very exciting. So what do you think of these latest developments? I mean, the multiverse then makes a lot of sense instead of having to try and figure out, how did mutants come about? How did all this stuff happen? Although, maybe, it'll be interesting to see, because the Fantastic Four, I don't know if I don't want to see another origin story with the X-Men, to be honest with you. So I'd be very happy for them to come through a portal and just be fully formed. But I think the Fantastic Four need a new origin story. I would like to maybe see an origin story with them. They're a smaller, more concrete team, and I think that's interesting. We'll see what Feige decides to do. So what do you think of these latest developments? And also, side note, you have to also wonder what will happen with these characters. Will they go back to will Marvel start making movies that take place in different multiverses? Do they have to now all be in the MCU to get movies? Or can you just say, oh, well, this franchise takes place like in Earth whatever it is, and this one takes place in Earth so-and-so, and then occasionally they will hop between universes because we can do that now. I mean, it's complex. It's complex. It's ridiculously complex. But it would mirror how they are in the comics. I mean, the Spider-Man world and the Avengers world are on the same page, but usually Fantastic Four and especially the X-Men are in their own little corner. So much so that when the X-Men did fight the Avengers, it felt off because they don't usually interact. All right, so share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.